It was a quiet morning in the courthouse, the kind where the hum of conversations blends into the shuffle of papers and the occasional clink of a coffee mug. Lawyers moved briskly, their shoes clicking against the polished marble floors, while clerks balanced thick files, darting between rooms. The atmosphere was calm but busy, filled with the routine chaos that came with the pursuit of justice. Officer James Carter, however, wasn't here for routine. Dressed sharply in his freshly pressed police uniform, he sat at the defense table with his arms crossed and a smug grin plastered across his face. Carter had been in courtrooms before but never as the defendant. Today was different, yet his confidence didn't waver. After all, he was a police officer, a figure of authority, someone who commanded respect. In his mind, this trial was just a minor inconvenience, a formality that would end with his reputation intact. The room buzzed softly as people filled the seats, most of them curious spectators. Some were there for the entertainment of a high-profile case, others out of a deep interest in the themes of justice and accountability that hung heavy in the air. Carter leaned back, surveying the crowd with a faint smirk. He had been in situations like this before, accusations, complaints, but they always ended the same way, quietly dismissed, swept under the rug. What made this time any different? Then the door to the courtroom opened, and all eyes turned toward the man walking in. Michael Porter. He was tall, with a steady, unassuming gait. His tailored suit fit perfectly, but it wasn't flashy. There was no air of arrogance about him, no attempt to draw attention. Yet, as he walked past the rows of onlookers, his presence seemed to fill the room. His face was calm, his expression unreadable, but his eyes carried a quiet determination that made even the most distracted spectators sit up a little straighter. Carter's smirk faltered for just a moment before returning. To him, Michael was just another lawyer, a man who thought he could challenge someone like him, someone protected by the badge and the system behind it. But Carter had no idea who he was dealing with. Michael Porter wasn't just another lawyer. He was a man with a story, one that started months ago on a quiet road where a routine traffic stop had spiraled into something much darker. Underscore 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 on. It had been a sunny afternoon when Michael first crossed paths with Officer Carter. He was driving home from a late meeting, his thoughts preoccupied with a case he was working on. The road was mostly empty, lined with tall trees swaying gently in the wind. Michael enjoyed these drives. They gave him time to think, to plan, to prepare for the challenges that lay ahead. But that peaceful moment shattered when flashing red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. Michael frowned, confused. He wasn't speeding, his car was in perfect condition, and he hadn't broken any traffic laws. Still, he pulled over to the side of the road, rolling down his window as the police car came to a stop behind him. Officer Carter stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel as he approached Michael's car. His demeanor was sharp, almost aggressive, as though he had already decided that Michael was guilty of something. "License and registration," Carter barked, his tone leaving no room for pleasantries. Michael complied, handing over the requested documents. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, keeping his voice calm and steady. Carter didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the documents, then back at Michael. His eyes narrowed, scanning the car and its occupant with a look that made Michael's stomach tighten. "You mind stepping out of the vehicle?" Carter said, his hand resting on the holster of his gun. Michael hesitated. "Is there a reason for this?" "I said step out," Carter snapped, his voice growing louder. Michael took a deep breath and did as he was told, stepping onto the side of the road. Carter began questioning him, throwing out vague accusations about suspicious behavior and possible illegal activity. The questions weren't just invasive, they were insulting. "Nice car you've got here," Carter sneered, circling the vehicle like a predator. Must be nice to afford something like this. What do you do for a living? I'm a lawyer, Michael replied evenly, though his hands clenched at his sides. Carter raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. A lawyer, huh? Well, we'll see about that. The stop dragged on far longer than it should have. Carter called for backup, had Michael's car searched without cause, and continued to throw baseless accusations his way. People drove by, slowing down to watch the scene unfold, and Michael felt a deep sense of humiliation settling over him. But he didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice or lose his composure. Instead, he quietly observed, memorizing every word, every action, every detail. By the time Carter finally let him go, Michael was exhausted but resolute. He knew what had happened wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was an abuse of power, fueled by prejudice. And Michael Porter wasn't the kind of man to let that slide. Underscore 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 on. Now, as Michael stood in the courtroom, facing the man who had once tried to humiliate him, he felt the weight of that moment all over again. But this time, the power dynamic was different. Carter might still wear his uniform, but Michael was the one in control now. The judge entered the room, and everyone rose. The trial was about to begin. Carter glanced at Michael, his confidence still unshaken. In his mind, this was just another case he could brush off. But Michael knew better. He had spent months preparing for this moment, building a case so airtight that even the most skilled defense lawyer would struggle to poke holes in it. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about justice, not just for himself, but for every person who had been wronged by people like Carter. And as the opening statements began, Michael's quiet confidence sent a clear message to everyone in the room: this story wasn't going to end the way Carter expected. Michael Porter had always been underestimated. It was something he had grown used to, but not something he ever let slide. He wore his tailored suits with quiet pride, knowing they represented his hard work and dedication to his craft. Yet, even those fine clothes couldn't protect him from the dismissive stares or the condescending tones people used when they first met him. To many, he was just another man who didn't quite fit the image they expected. It wasn't just the strangers in coffee shops or clients who doubted his expertise before hearing him speak. No, the prejudice ran deeper than that. It was in the way waiters handed him the bill without asking, or the way some people hesitated before shaking his hand. Michael had learned to navigate these moments with grace. He'd smile, remain calm, and let his accomplishments speak for themselves. But Officer James Carter? He was a different story entirely. Carter wasn't subtle. He wasn't the kind of person to hide his thoughts or bury his bias behind polite words. No, Carter wore his prejudice openly, like a badge of honor. For him, people like Michael were easy targets. He didn't care about the lives they led, their accomplishments, or their humanity. To Carter, all that mattered was his gut feeling, a profile, as he liked to call it. Months ago, their paths had crossed on a quiet suburban street. Michael had been driving home from a late night at the office, his mind focused on the case he was preparing. It was a case that had consumed his thoughts for weeks, a wrongful termination lawsuit he was passionate about winning. The road was nearly empty, with only the soft glow of streetlights illuminating his way. The hum of his car was soothing, a rare moment of peace in his busy life. Then the flashing lights appeared. Michael glanced in his rearview mirror, confused. He wasn't speeding. He hadn't run a red light. His car was in perfect working order. There was no logical reason for a police officer to be pulling him over. Yet, here he was, slowing to a stop on the side of the road as the patrol car parked behind him. When Officer Carter stepped out, Michael immediately felt a shift in the air. The officer's walk was slow and deliberate, his hand resting lightly on the holster of his gun. The way Carter approached wasn't just procedural, it was accusatory. Michael rolled down his window, his hands resting visibly on the steering wheel, just as he'd been taught. "License and registration," Carter said gruffly, not even bothering with a greeting. Michael complied without hesitation. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, his voice steady and polite. Carter didn't answer right away. He flipped through Michael's documents, his lips curling into a slight sneer. His eyes darted between Michael and the car, a sleek, black sedan that spoke of success and professionalism. "What are you doing out here so late?" Carter asked, his tone sharp. "Driving home from work," Michael replied simply. "I'm a lawyer." Carter raised an eyebrow, the corners of his mouth twitching as if he found the statement amusing. "A lawyer, huh? Must be nice." Michael didn't respond. He knew better than to take the bait. "Step out of the car," Carter said abruptly. Michael blinked. "Is there a reason for that?" "I said step out of the car," Carter repeated, his voice louder now, more commanding. Michael's jaw tightened, but he complied. He unbuckled his seat belt, opened the door, and stepped onto the pavement. The cool night air bit at his skin as he stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't done anything wrong, but the situation felt dangerous all the same. Carter began circling the car, his eyes scanning every inch of it. "Nice ride," he muttered. "How'd you get it?" "I worked for it," Michael said, keeping his tone calm. "Like I said, I'm a lawyer." Carter chuckled, a low, mocking sound. "Sure you are." The officer's skepticism was blatant, his words dripping with condescension. It didn't matter what Michael said or how he carried himself, Carter had already made up his mind. To him, Michael was guilty of something, even if he didn't yet know what. Backup arrived minutes later, 2 more officers who joined in the charade. They searched Michael's car without cause, rummaging through his belongings as if they expected to find something incriminating. They didn't, of course. Michael's life was as clean as his car, every detail meticulously organized and accounted for. But that didn't stop Carter. "You look nervous," Carter said, his tone accusing. Michael's patience was wearing thin, but he refused to let it show. "I'm not nervous," he said evenly. "I just don't understand why I'm being treated this way." Carter smirked. "You people always play the victim, don't you?" The words hit Michael like a slap. They were meant to provoke, to strip away his dignity and reduce him to a stereotype. But Michael didn't take the bait. He stood there, silent, letting the weight of Carter's words hang in the air. When the officers finally finished their search, they found nothing, of course. Carter handed back Michael's documents with a look of annoyance, as if Michael had somehow inconvenienced him by being innocent. "You're free to go," Carter said, his tone dismissive. "For now." Michael took his documents and got back into his car without a word. As he drove away, his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing. The encounter had been humiliating, infuriating, and entirely unjust. But Michael wasn't the kind of man to let something like this go. Underscore 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 on. For Officer Carter, that traffic stop was just another night on the job. He'd forgotten about it by the time his shift ended. But for Michael, it was the beginning of something bigger. Over the following weeks, Michael began gathering evidence. He filed a complaint, only to watch it get buried under bureaucratic red tape. That didn't surprise him. He'd seen the system fail too many times to expect otherwise. But Michael wasn't discouraged. If anything, the lack of accountability only fueled his determination. He started digging deeper, requesting records and interviewing others who had crossed paths with Carter. What he found was a pattern: dozens of complaints, all eerily similar to his own. People pulled over for no reason, treated with hostility, their dignity stripped away by a man who hid his prejudice behind a badge. Michael's case wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who had been wronged by Officer Carter. It was about exposing the truth and holding the system accountable. And now, as he stood in the courtroom facing the man who had tried to humiliate him, Michael felt a quiet resolve settle over him. Carter still wore his smug smile, confident that the system would protect him as it always had. But Michael knew better. He had spent months preparing for this moment, building a case so strong it couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just a fight for justice, it was a fight for change. Officer James Carter had no idea who Michael Porter really was. That night, on the side of the road, all Carter saw was what he wanted to see: a black man driving an expensive car, someone who didn't fit the mold of success as Carter imagined it. To Carter, it was just another stop, another chance to flex his authority. He didn't see Michael as a person, he saw him as a target. But Michael? He saw everything. He saw Carter's mocking smirk, the way his lips curled with disdain as he spoke. He saw the hand that lingered just a little too long near his gun, a silent threat meant to remind Michael of the power Carter believed he held. He heard every baseless accusation, every assumption dripping with prejudice. And most importantly, Michael remembered. He remembered it all. The days following the incident were filled with anger and frustration. Michael replayed the encounter over and over in his mind, each detail clearer than the last. It wasn't just the humiliation of being treated like a criminal, it was the knowledge that this wasn't an isolated incident. Michael knew men like Carter didn't operate in a vacuum. He wasn't the first to experience this, and he wouldn't be the last. Michael decided that night that he wouldn't let it go. He couldn't. As a lawyer, he had spent his career fighting for people who had been wronged by those in power. He had seen how systems built to protect often failed the very people they were meant to serve. This time, the fight was personal. Underscore 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 on. Michael began his work quietly, methodically. He knew this wasn't a battle he could rush into. The system was designed to protect officers like Carter, to brush complaints under the rug and maintain the illusion of accountability. If Michael wanted to succeed, he needed to be meticulous. The first step was filing a formal complaint. Michael knew it wouldn't lead anywhere, not yet, at least, but it was important to lay the groundwork. The process was as frustrating as he expected. The department's response was slow and dismissive, filled with vague assurances that the matter would be looked into. Michael wasn't surprised. He didn't expect justice to come from a form letter. While waiting for the department's predictable non-response, Michael started digging deeper. He requested public records, poring over files and documents late into the night. He reached out to community members, asking if they'd had similar experiences with Officer Carter. The stories he heard were both heartbreaking and infuriating. There was the young woman who had been pulled over for a broken tail light that wasn't broken. She described how Carter had kept her on the side of the road for nearly an hour, questioning her about where she was going and why. Then there was the middle-aged man who had been stopped while walking home from the grocery store. Carter had accused him of looking suspicious, even as the man held bags of groceries in his hands. Each story was a piece of a larger puzzle, and Michael was determined to put it all together. Underscore 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 on. As the weeks turned into months, Michael's case began to take shape. He found patterns in the complaints, clear evidence of racial profiling and abuse of power. Carter's arrogance had been his downfall. He had operated with impunity for so long that he didn't even bother to cover his tracks. His misconduct was there for anyone willing to look closely enough. But Michael didn't just stop at gathering stories. He knew he needed hard evidence, something undeniable. He started reviewing body camera footage from similar stops, piecing together a timeline of Carter's behavior. Some of the videos were infuriating to watch. They showed Carter's blatant disregard for protocol, his sneering tone, and his willingness to escalate situations without cause. One video, in particular, stood out. It showed Carter pulling over a young black man who had been driving home from his college campus. The man's voice shook as he explained he was late for class, his hands visibly trembling as he handed over his license. Carter's tone was cold, almost taunting, as he accused the man of acting nervous. Watching that video, Michael felt a deep anger boiling inside him. He knew the fear in that young man's voice because he had felt it himself. Michael carefully documented everything, creating a timeline of events that painted a clear picture of Carter's pattern of behavior. But he didn't stop there. He knew the legal system wasn't just about presenting facts, it was about telling a story. And Michael was a master storyteller. Underscore 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 on. As the trial date approached, Michael began to feel the weight of what he was about to do. This wasn't just about holding Carter accountable, it was about sending a message. It was about standing up against a system that had allowed people like Carter to thrive for far too long. Michael knew the stakes were high, but he was ready. On the day of the trial, Michael arrived early. He wanted to feel the energy of the room, to prepare himself for the battle ahead. He watched as people filtered in, members of the press, curious onlookers, and supporters who had heard about the case through community networks. The courtroom was packed, the air buzzing with anticipation. Then Carter walked in. He was dressed sharply in his uniform, his posture rigid and his expression smug. He scanned the room, his gaze briefly landing on Michael before moving on. It was clear Carter still didn't understand the gravity of what was about to happen. To him, this was just another complaint that would be dismissed like all the others. Michael didn't let Carter's confidence shake him. He had prepared for this moment for months, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. As the judge called the court to order, Michael rose to deliver his opening statement. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady and clear. "This case isn't just about one traffic stop. It's about a pattern of behavior, a misuse of power, and a failure of accountability. Today, we're here to shed light on actions that have gone unchecked for far too long. And we're here to seek justice not just for myself, but for everyone who has been affected by this behavior." The room was silent as Michael spoke, every word landing with precision. He didn't need theatrics or dramatic gestures. His quiet confidence was enough to command attention. As the trial unfolded, Michael methodically presented his evidence. He called witnesses who shared their stories, their voices shaking with emotion as they recounted their experiences. He played the body camera footage, letting the videos speak for themselves. And with each piece of evidence, Carter's confidence began to waver. Michael watched as the jury's expressions shifted, their initial neutrality giving way to clear concern. They saw what Michael had seen all along: the pattern, the prejudice, the abuse of power. By the time the trial neared its end, it was clear that Carter's defense was crumbling. The once smug officer now sat rigidly in his seat, his jaw clenched and his eyes darting nervously around the room. Michael could feel the tide turning. And as he prepared for his closing statement, he knew that justice was finally within reach. The courtroom was silent, so silent that even the faintest sound, a shuffling of papers, the clearing of a throat, seemed to echo against the walls. Michael Porter stood, his tall frame composed and steady. His calmness was not from a lack of emotion, but from control. Beneath the surface of his measured demeanor burned a fire, a deep, unrelenting determination for justice. This was the moment he had worked tirelessly for, and he was ready. He approached the jury slowly, deliberately, making eye contact with each juror. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but filled with purpose, "today we are here not just to examine the actions of one man, but to confront a larger problem, a problem that hides in plain sight, one that too many of us have ignored for too long." Officer Carter sat at the defense table, his face a mask of forced confidence. His attorney whispered something to him, but Carter barely seemed to hear. His once smug demeanor had been replaced by a stiffness that betrayed his growing discomfort. He had underestimated Michael from the start, and now, with each word Michael spoke, it was becoming clear just how grave that mistake had been. Michael began to outline the case, his voice never wavering. "Let's start with the facts," he said, gesturing to the screen behind him. "On the night of my traffic stop, Officer Carter claimed to have pulled me over for a legitimate reason. But when pressed, he couldn't provide a single concrete justification. Instead, he relied on vague accusations and baseless assumptions, none of which held up under scrutiny." A video clip played on the screen. It was from Carter's own body camera, showing the moment he approached Michael's car. The audio captured Carter's dismissive tone, the condescension in his voice as he asked Michael what he was doing in the area. The courtroom watched intently, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats as the footage made clear the imbalance of power in that moment. Michael let the silence linger for a moment after the clip ended. Then he continued, his tone sharper now. "But this wasn't an isolated incident. Officer Carter didn't just wake up one day and decide to act this way. His behavior is part of a pattern of targeting individuals based on nothing more than the color of their skin." He clicked to the next slide, displaying a series of records. "These are complaints filed against Officer Carter over the past 5 years. There are 37 of them. 37 people who described experiences strikingly similar to mine. 37 stories of stops without cause, searches without reason, and treatment that no one should have to endure." Murmurs rippled through the room. 37 complaints? The number hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the scale of Carter's misconduct. Even the jurors, who had been instructed to remain neutral, couldn't hide their reactions entirely. A few shifted in their seats, their expressions growing more serious. Michael wasn't done. "Let me introduce you to some of those voices," he said, stepping aside as the screen changed again. This time, it displayed a video compilation of interviews Michael had conducted with some of Carter's other victims. Their faces appeared one by one, their voices trembling as they recounted their stories. A young woman spoke first, describing how Carter had pulled her over for a supposed broken tail light that turned out to be perfectly functional. "He kept me on the side of the road for 45 minutes, she said, her voice shaking. "I was scared the entire time." Next came an older man, his hands clasped tightly in his lap as he spoke. "I was walking home from work," he said. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. But he stopped me, questioned me like I was a criminal, and searched my bag without asking." One by one, the stories played out, each one a painful echo of Michael's own experience. By the time the last clip ended, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted entirely. The murmurs had died down, replaced by a heavy, almost suffocating silence. Michael returned to the center of the room, his expression resolute. "These stories are not just anecdotes," he said firmly. "They are evidence. Evidence of a pattern, a clear and undeniable pattern of discrimination and abuse of power." He turned toward Carter, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "Officer Carter, you didn't just target me that night. You have spent years targeting people who look like me. You have used your badge not as a symbol of protection, but as a weapon of intimidation. And today, we are here to hold you accountable." Carter's attorney stood to object, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Let Mr. Porter finish," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. It was clear the judge, too, was struck by the weight of Michael's argument. Michael faced the jury once more, his voice softening but losing none of its intensity. "This case is not just about me," he said. "It's about every person who has been judged not for what they've done, but for who they are. It's about every person who has felt the fear and humiliation that comes from being treated as less than human. And it's about making sure that no one else has to feel that way again." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was utterly still, every eye on him. "I ask you," he said, his voice rising slightly, "to imagine what it feels like to be stopped, questioned, and accused without cause. To know that no matter what you say or do, it won't matter because the person in power has already made up their mind about you. That is what Officer Carter did to me. That is what he has done to so many others." Michael took a step closer to the jury, his eyes scanning their faces. "But we have a chance to change that," he said. "We have a chance to send a message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated, that justice is not just a word, but a promise that everyone, no matter who they are, will be treated with dignity and respect." His final words hung in the air like a challenge. "I trust you to make the right decision. Not just for me, but for all of us." As Michael returned to his seat, the room remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the murmurs began again. People leaned toward each other, whispering in hushed tones. The jurors exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable but deeply thoughtful. Carter sat stiffly, his hands clenched into fists. The confidence he had worn like armor at the beginning of the trial was gone, replaced by a nervous energy he couldn't hide. He had been exposed, his actions laid bare for all to see. And for the first time, he seemed to realize that he might not walk away from this unscathed. The trial wasn't over yet, but the momentum had shifted. Michael had turned the tide, and everyone in the room could feel it. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with people waiting for the verdict. The air was thick with anticipation, a collective tension that seemed to make the room smaller. Michael sat at his table, calm and composed, his hands resting lightly on the polished wood. Across from him, Officer James Carter fidgeted in his seat, his once confident demeanor now overshadowed by visible anxiety. The jury had been deliberating for hours, but for Michael, it felt like a lifetime. Finally, the door to the jury room opened. 12 men and women filed back into the courtroom, their faces serious and focused. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose, held a piece of paper in her hand. She avoided making eye contact with anyone as she approached the judge, handing over the verdict. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the judge began, her voice steady but tinged with the gravity of the moment, "have you reached a unanimous decision?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson replied. The courtroom fell into a silence so profound that even the faintest sound of pen clicking, a cough would have been deafening. The judge unfolded the paper and read its contents. Her expression remained neutral, but Michael could see a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes as she looked back at the jury. "In the matter of Officer James Carter, we find the defendant guilty of misconduct in office and abuse of power," the judge announced. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed from the gallery, followed by murmurs that spread like wildfire. Some leaned forward in their seats, while others exchanged glances filled with a mixture of relief and vindication. For the people who had come to witness this trial, the verdict was more than just a decision, it was a statement. Michael felt a weight lift from his chest, though his expression remained steady. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. Instead, he sat quietly, allowing the moment to wash over him. He had fought for this not just for himself, but for everyone who had been wronged by Carter's actions. underscore 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 on. The judge's voice rose above the noise, calling for order. Officer Carter, she said, addressing the defendant directly, your actions have not only violated the trust placed in you as a law enforcement officer but have also caused significant harm to the very community you swore to protect. This court cannot and will not tolerate such behavior. Carter stood, his shoulders stiff and his face pale. For once, he had no words. The arrogance, the smugness that had been his shield throughout the trial, was gone. He was no longer the untouchable officer he had once believed himself to be. Now, he was just a man facing the consequences of his actions. As a result of your misconduct, the judge continued, you are hereby sentenced to, she paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. A 2-year suspension without pay, mandatory sensitivity training, and the revocation of your right to serve in a law enforcement capacity indefinitely. Additionally, you will be fined and are required to issue a formal public apology to the victims of your actions. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder at the announcement of the sentence. Some thought it was too lenient, while others saw it as a step in the right direction. For Michael, it wasn't about the severity of the punishment, it was about the acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The system, flawed as it was, had finally held someone accountable. Underscore 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 on. As Carter was led out of the courtroom by security, his head hung low. He didn't look at anyone, not even Michael. But as he passed by, Michael caught a glimpse of his face. There was no defiance, no indignation, only a quiet resignation. For the first time, it seemed, Carter understood the full weight of his actions. Michael didn't feel the need to gloat or say anything to Carter. Words wouldn't change what had happened, and they wouldn't undo the harm Carter had caused. Instead, Michael chose to let his silence speak for him. His dignity, his composure, were more powerful than any words of victory could be. Underscore 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 on. The courtroom began to empty, but Michael stayed seated for a moment, letting the room clear. He watched as people filed out, some patting him on the back or offering quiet congratulations. He nodded politely, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He was thinking about the young man who had been pulled over on his way to college, the older woman who had been stopped on her way to church, the countless others who had suffered in silence. This victory wasn't just his, it belonged to all of them. Michael's attorney approached him, a smile on her face. You did it, she said simply. We did it, Michael corrected. This was a team effort. She nodded, acknowledging his humility. What's next for you? Michael paused, considering the question. There's still work to do, he said. This is one victory, but it's not the end. There are more Carters out there, and there are more people who need someone to stand up for them. Underscore 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 on. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Reporters jostled for position, their cameras flashing as Michael stepped into the sunlight. Microphones were thrust in his direction, voices overlapping as they called out questions. Mr. Porter, how do you feel about the verdict? Do you think justice was served? What message do you hope this sends? Michael raised a hand, signaling for quiet. The crowd stilled, their attention focused entirely on him. I'm grateful for today's outcome, he began, his voice clear and steady. But this isn't just about one case or one verdict. This is about holding people accountable, about ensuring that everyone regardless of who they are can live without fear of being targeted or mistreated. He paused, letting his words sink in. Justice isn't a single moment. It's a process, a commitment we have to make every day. Today was a step forward, but there's still a long way to go. With that, Michael stepped away, leaving the reporters scrambling to relay his words. He didn't stay for the applause or the cheers that followed. For him, the real victory wasn't in the spotlight, it was in knowing he had made a difference. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about change. Michael Porter understood this deeply. The courtroom victory had been important, yes, but it was only one chapter in a much larger story. For Michael, the trial wasn't just about proving Officer Carter's guilt, it was about shining a light on a system that allowed such behavior to exist in the first place. And as he stepped out into the sunlight, the weight of that responsibility stayed with him. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and supporters. Michael paused for a moment, looking at the sea of faces. Some were eager for sound bites, holding out microphones and cameras, while others were quiet, their expressions full of gratitude and hope. Among the crowd, Michael noticed a young man standing near the back. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot, his hands clutching a notebook. Something about him reminded Michael of himself years ago, determined but unsure of how to begin. Michael took a deep breath and approached the microphones. His words weren't just for the reporters, they were for the people watching, the people listening, and the people who might one day find themselves in situations like his. Today, he began, his voice steady, we saw that justice is possible. But justice is not just a verdict, it's a process. It's about changing the way we see each other, the way we treat each other, and the way we hold people accountable. This isn't the end of a fight. It's the beginning. He glanced at the young man in the back, hoping his words would resonate with him. Prejudice thrives in silence, Michael continued. It grows when we look away, when we convince ourselves it's not our problem. But courage and truth can shatter it. And that's what today was about. Underscore 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 on. As Michael stepped away from the podium, the crowd parted for him. Some clapped, others called out words of support, but Michael's focus remained forward. He didn't linger on the praise or let himself feel victorious for too long. The work was far from over. He walked to a nearby bench under the shade of a tree. Sitting down, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through the messages that had flooded in. Some were from old friends congratulating him, others from strangers thanking him for standing up. One message caught his eye. It was from a woman named Angela, one of the people who had testified during the trial. Thank you for fighting for us, her message read. Because of you, I feel like my voice matters. Don't stop. Michael stared at the screen for a long moment. Angela's words reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about bringing down one officer or winning one case, it was about giving people like Angela, people like himself, the belief that their voices could make a difference. Underscore 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 on. Later that evening, Michael returned to his office. The space was quiet, the hum of the city outside barely audible through the windows. He sat at his desk, surrounded by files and documents, and began to reflect on everything that had brought him to this point. He thought about his family, his parents, who had taught him the value of hard work and integrity, his friends, who had stood by him even when the odds seemed stacked against him. He thought about the long nights spent preparing for the trial, the moments of doubt, and the resolve that had kept him moving forward. Most of all, he thought about the people who had been silent victims of prejudice and discrimination. He thought about their stories, their pain, and the courage it had taken for them to speak out. Michael knew he had been their voice in that courtroom, but now it was time to help them find their own. Underscore 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 on. The next day, Michael met with his team. The energy in the room was a mix of exhaustion and determination. The trial had taken its toll on all of them, but there was a shared understanding that their work wasn't finished. "We've set a precedent," Michael said, looking around the room. "But now we need to make sure it sticks. We need to keep fighting not just in courtrooms, but in communities. We need to educate, to advocate, to hold people accountable." One of his team members, a young paralegal named Jason, raised his hand. "How do we start?" he asked. Michael smiled. "We start by listening," he said. "By hearing the stories that aren't being told. By finding the people who feel invisible and making sure they know they're seen." Underscore 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 on. Over the next few weeks, Michael threw himself into his work with renewed purpose. He began hosting community forums, creating spaces where people could share their experiences without fear. He partnered with advocacy groups, working to push for policy changes that would address systemic issues in law enforcement. He even started mentoring young law students, sharing his story and encouraging them to pursue justice in their own ways. One evening, after a particularly long day, Michael received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, the paper slightly crumpled, but the words were clear. "Dear Mr. Porter," it began. "I watched your trial from start to finish. I've been afraid to speak out about what happened to me, but seeing you stand up gave me the courage I needed. Thank you for showing me that one voice can make a difference." Michael felt a lump form in his throat as he read the letter. It was a reminder that his work was making an impact, even in ways he couldn't always see. Underscore 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 on. Years later, Michael would look back on this time as a turning point not just in his career, but in his life. The trial against Officer Carter had been a catalyst, sparking a movement that reached far beyond the walls of that courtroom. But for Michael, the greatest victory wasn't the verdict or the recognition. It was the knowledge that he had used his voice to help others find theirs. It was the realization that justice wasn't just about what happened in court, it was about what happened in hearts and minds. As he walked into his office one morning, greeted by the buzz of his team hard at work, Michael allowed himself a small smile. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. But for the first time, he felt a deep sense of hope. Because justice, he had learned, wasn't just an outcome. It was a journey. And he was ready to keep walking it.